Get a lot of firsts these days, but for the first time, Canadian liquefied natural gas is heading overseas. Fuel from the LNG Canada export terminal in Kitimat, BC is now sailing towards.
3 minutes ago, the globe saw a power shift that only a few years ago seemed unthinkable. For more than 30 years, Canada sent virtually all of its natural gas directly to the United States, fueling American homes, industries, and profits. But not anymore. On June 30th, 2025, Canada created history. For the first time ever, its liquefied natural gas, LNG, departed port for Asia rather than the United States. This initial shipment, destined for China, Japan, and South Korea, ruptured decades of reliance and startled Washington. Why now? Simple: tariffs. Following months of growing economic warfare, the Trump administration's aggressive 10% energy import tariff failed. Canada didn't only respond, it reacted, shutting off the pipeline supplies, which used to bring in $8 billion US every year. Instead, it created a completely new path over the Pacific. Trump is upset. Asian markets are rejoicing, and Canada. It has finally established itself as an independent player in the global energy market. In this video, we'll look at the daring move that has redrawn the geography of North American energy. From trade conflicts to Indigenous collaborations, climate ambitions to geopolitical shockwaves, here's the story of how Canada just changed the script. And what happens next may surprise you. June 30th, 2025. This is a date that will be remembered in Canadian energy history. In the morning, a ship carrying 2.6 million tons of premium liquefied natural gas departed Kitimat, British Columbia. What's its destination? Asia, not America. That one journey signaled the end of a decades-long agreement in which Canada routed all of its natural gas exports through U.S. pipelines. Prior to this, roughly 8.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day entered the United States, valued more than $8 billion in 2024 alone. However, the game has altered. For the first time, Canadian gas bypassed the landlocked route and sailed directly to energy-hungry nations such as Japan, South Korea, and China. These nations are vying to replace Russian gas and coal with cleaner, more reliable LNG sources. Canada quickly responded to that demand. LNG Canada, a $40 billion CAD megaproject combining oil giants Shell, Petronas, PetroChina, Mitsubishi, and Kogas, is driving this historic turn. After years of construction and political fighting, they finished a 670-kilometer pipeline from Dawson Creek to Kitimat's coast, converting Canadian shale gas into exportable LNG. With one ship, Canada eliminated its dependency on U.S. pipelines. Most importantly, it proclaimed energy independence. Instead of being a silent provider behind American borders, Canada is now on the global stage and aggressively competing with the United States in the energy market. And in doing so, it may have ushered in a new age of economic competition with its southern neighbor. What caused this seismic shift? Tariffs are a one-word term. On March 4th, 2025, the Trump administration slashed Canadian exports. A 25% tax was imposed on almost anything crossing the border, including a targeted 10% levy on Canadian electricity. It was a political act intended to put pressure on Ottawa during trade discussions. Instead of caving, Canada defied the system. Prior to the tariffs, Canada's gas had a significant advantage. American customers paid less because Canada's inexpensive AECO benchmark, around 71 cents per MMBtu, was lower than the Henry Hub pricing in the United States, which was $3.74. What was the result? American firms purchased Canadian gas in volume. It was inexpensive, dependable, and close. But Trump's tariffs lost that advantage overnight. Canadian gasoline became too costly to compete. Long-term contracts were thrown into disarray. For the first time in decades, American businesses started looking overseas. Ironically, this opened the way for Asia. With Europe still grieving from the loss of Russian energy, Asian countries scrambled to get reliable LNG. Canada sensed a chance and took it. Trump's tariffs were intended to harm Canada. Instead, they pushed Canada to innovate. Ottawa approved marine exports, accelerated LNG infrastructure, and signed multi-billion-dollar agreements with purchasers in China, Japan, and South Korea. The message was clear. If Washington doesn't play fairly, Canada will not participate at all. And with one bold choice, the pipeline-dependent North became a Pacific energy powerhouse, enraging Trump and sending American purchasers scurrying for a backup plan. This energy shift was made possible not just by political will, but also by a technical miracle. A silent revolution is taking place deep in the rough landscape of northern British Columbia, LNG Canada. This is not a typical energy project. It's a $40 billion CAD megaventure combining a powerful alliance of global behemoths: Shell, Petronas, PetroChina, Mitsubishi. They work together to construct one of the world's most modern and ecologically friendly LNG export facilities, which is located in the little town of Kitimat. What is the operation's cornerstone? The Coastal Gas Link is a 670-kilometer pipeline that connects Dawson Creek's gas-rich fields to the Pacific coast. It transports huge amounts of natural gas from Montney shale deposits, where it is chilled to minus 165 degrees Celsius and compressed 600 times for easier transport. Inside the Kitimat complex, 2 liquefaction trains operate around the clock, producing up to 14 million tons of LNG yearly. Even more impressive, it is powered by pure hydroelectricity from British Columbia, which reduces emissions significantly. JGC of Japan and Fluor of America supply the equipment, which combines cutting-edge technology with ESG principles. Unlike Gulf Coast U.S. projects that rely on canal systems and lengthy trips, Kitimat's direct Pacific access allows it to cut shipping time to Asia in half, only 10 days to Japan or South Korea. Canada did not just build a terminal. It created a launch pad that avoids U.S. tariffs, reduces emissions, shortens delivery times, and initiates a completely new trading channel. It's no longer only about exporting gas. It's about altering the rules for global energy. Asia was ready to receive Canada's first LNG shipment the minute it departed Kitimat. Across the Pacific, countries are trying to obtain cleaner, more dependable energy supplies, particularly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine damaged faith in conventional sources. For Japan, South Korea, and China, Canadian LNG could not have arrived at a better moment. Let us break it down. Japan, which depends on imported gas for more than 80% of its power generation, has planned to add 20 million tons of LNG per year beginning in 2026. They've been aggressively looking for cleaner, geopolitically neutral supplies, and Canada matches the description. South Korea is aggressively growing its infrastructure, with plans to raise LNG storage capacity by 50% over the next decade. For a country that relies on winter heating and industrial energy, having a reliable LNG partner like Canada is more than a bonus. It's a need. And China? They moved quickly. With demand expected to rise in the approaching winter, Chinese corporations signed long-term contracts to get Canadian LNG before competitors could respond. But here's the actual game changer: delivery time. Traditional U.S. exports must sail via the Panama Canal, which can take up to 20 days. In contrast, Canada's LNG sails directly over the Pacific, cutting the travel time in half. This saves millions in shipping expenses every cruise. This isn't only about energy, it is about trust, speed, and geopolitics. And as of June 30th, 2025, Canada has demonstrated that it can deliver on all three. For Asia's energy behemoths, the Maple Leaf is more than simply a backup plan. It's a top-tier supply in an unpredictable world. Behind the concrete and steel of Canada's LNG rush is a lesser-known narrative of Indigenous collaboration, environmental pledges, and a country's ESG promise put to the test. The Haisla Nation is in the center of this, with ancestral territories along the pipeline route and Kitimat's shore. Unlike previous pipeline disputes, which were typically contentious, this time around, things went differently. LNG Canada inked contracts totaling $5.8 billion CAD with Indigenous enterprises and local suppliers. The Haisla community was not only compensated, they also became stakeholders. They got a portion of future revenues from their equity involvement in the Coastal GasLink, assuring long-term advantages beyond temporary employment. Over 50,000 Canadian laborers were engaged over the 7-year building period. Aside from employment, this was about sovereignty and inclusivity. For the Haisla, it meant preserving their territory and culture on their own terms while acquiring significant economic power. Environmentally, the project meets important ESG criteria. Powered by clean hydro, Kitimat has one of the lowest carbon footprints of any LNG complex in the world. However, it is not without debate. Operating in British Columbia's severe environment incurs considerable expenses and adds new problems to emissions management, wildlife preservation, and carbon offset compliance. To alleviate the expense, the government provided carbon tax and sales tax breaks, prompting outrage from environmental organizations who accused Ottawa of corporate leniency. So while Canada's LNG expansion appears to be a clear success, it is accompanied by nuanced discussions about environmental trade-offs, Indigenous rights, and long-term responsibilities. For the time being, one thing is clear: Canada is attempting to demonstrate to the rest of the globe that large energy does not have to imply huge exploitation, and that collaboration can drive change. Canada's daring LNG shift has turned the tables. What began as a trade battle initiated by Washington may have just delivered Ottawa its largest energy gain in decades. Canada is no longer constrained by U.S. pipelines or exposed to tariffs. Instead, it now ships its gas straight into the ports of Asia's largest economies, earning more, moving quicker, and winning worldwide recognition. Trump's tariffs were intended to penalize. Instead, they encourage Canada to innovate, invest, and regain ownership of its resources. With 170 trips scheduled each year and plans to double capacity, LNG Canada has ushered the country into a new era of energy. But success isn't cheap. Phase 2 in northern British Columbia is an uphill battle because of high prices, environmental scrutiny, and the sheer scope of the project. And don't forget, Washington is unlikely to remain silent. More tariffs, pipeline politics. The next move might be right around the corner. Still, Canada has demonstrated something larger than any single cargo. It exports more than simply gas. It also exports resilience, strategy, and ambition. What's the true question now? Is Canada's current momentum sustainable, or have they entered a more volatile market? Stay tuned, because the energy battles have only just started.